Welcome, friend, to the Town Hall Academy from Remarkable Results Radio, the original weekly single-subject forum for the aftermarket perpetual student, and I know you are. It's Carm Capriato, and we work hard for you to share the voices, ideas, and insights that are shaping the future of the aftermarket. This episode is about delayed maintenance and the power of appointments. You're going to find fascinating data and information that will help you make strategic changes in your business. I'm sure of that. I'm with Bill Thompson, President IMR Inc., automotiveresearch.com, and shop owner Brett Beachler from Beachlers Vehicle Care in Peoria, Illinois. Hey, two very important partners bring you the Town Hall Academy, Shopware and Shop Marketing Pros. Now, isn't wowing your customers important while keeping your distance? Well, even while staying 6 feet apart, Shopware's innovative technology will help you move cars through safely and efficiently. Completely digital workflow allows customers to review, approve, and pay for repairs all in one place. You've been thinking about it, I know. Now request a demo at getshopware.com/carm. Ask yourself if your social media truly represents your shop, or is it just plain vanilla generic posts? Do you know that it doesn't have to be that way? The experts, and they are at Shop Marketing Pros, listen and create social content that connects you to your community. On the web at shopmarketingpros.com. Tell them Carm sent you. Hey, to see the data referenced in this Academy episode, you can watch the video on the show notes page or on my YouTube channel, or find the charts on the show notes page. An abundance of key takeaways you will value as you listen to learn just one thing. Here's a taste of what's to come.
40% or so of the folks saying, yeah, I would actually take advantage of it if I had a really costly repair, I think is a fascinating thing.
Hello, friend. Carm Capriato, the Aftermarket Podcast Guy, where we've cataloged every one of the 800-plus episodes by series and keywords. The website, it's got a ton of resources and ways to find just what you're looking for. Now, you need to know that I'm honored to have you as a listener. And if you're not listening mobile, go to remarkableresults.biz/listen to download a free podcast listening app. Now, here's some fun facts. Did you know that we record the Town Hall Academy, of which you're listening to now, live on Fridays at noon Eastern Time? You can watch the live recording on my website or on my social media feeds. Now, we do the same with the fun magazine-style, quick-paced show called Aftermarket Weekly. We do that Tuesdays live at noon Eastern. Archived episodes at aftermarketweekly.com, and you get to see a shop tour each and every week. Now, by the way, there's a ton of great advice here on this show, but don't take my word for it. Listen until the end, even if you've got to go over 2 sessions. Get all the key talking points on the website at remarkableresults.biz/A189. Now, Bill Thompson and Brett Beachler. With me is Bill Thompson, CEO of IMR Inc., automotiveresearch.com. Hello, Bill.
Hello, Carm.
And Brett Beachler. Hello, Brett. How are you?
Hi, Carm. I'm fantastic. How about yourself?
Beachlers Vehicle Care and Repair, Peoria, Illinois. By the way, I got to thank Bill. He was on a Carmcast with me a while back, and we use his surveys a lot on our show called aftermarketweekly.com, and that's the Tuesday show that's live. Of course, it's repurposed again, and you can watch all 18 previous weeks' worth of episodes. And Bill, thank you so much for all the great things you're doing, because I think it's enlightening to shock ourselves into knowing, what not only shops are saying, but what consumers are saying about our wonderful industry. So thank you for that. In order to discuss delayed maintenance and setting appointments, which Brett and Craig, if Craig gets a chance to join us, but at least that I know Brent does this, we've got to understand what's going on inside the industry. And Bill, I'm going to share a screen he sent to me in some of the survey data, and we're going to talk about this. I'm going to turn it over to Bill, and I want you to look carefully at what these surveys are telling you, and I want you to make adjustments to your business, and then take what we're going to talk about today and see what kind of new strategic initiatives you can put in. And I know Brent's got a lot to say about that. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Bill.
In our world, when we talk about delayed maintenance, when we do research on delayed maintenance, we're really talking about people that knowingly have put off a repair or a service on their vehicle. It's not that it's underperformed, so to speak. They didn't meet some mileage, that they didn't do it at the 30,000 mile mark, whatever it is. It's that they know. And we've been tracking those numbers since 2016, every quarter over quarter since 2016. And given the pandemic that started, what was it, March at some point in that period of time when things kind of, went to the wall, so to speak, we've been trying to figure out really what's been going on and what does it mean for, shops in general in the industry, right? Because as people put off more and more repairs on their vehicle, right, it affects everybody, whether they're DIY, whether it's the DIY side of the business, the DIFM side of the business. So for some context, back in 2016 when we started, the percentage of vehicles on the road that were delaying maintenance on their vehicles was something around 20% or 21%, right? And let me contextualize that for you. What that really means is when you drive around, 1 out of every 5 vehicles might have had a bumper that had a dent in it that they weren't going to fix. Or it might have meant they put off tires, or they just aren't doing their oil on, they know they need to get it done. They're just not doing it. These aren't all catastrophic per se, right? But they're just things that the consumer knows that I've got to do to this vehicle. I just haven't gotten around to it yet. And so typically, what we would have seen before is 40% or so of them will come to market in 3 or 4 weeks within a month to have that work done. So it's not like they're not going to ever do it. In some cases, they may not, but the vast majority of the repairs seem to be things that they're going to do. Q1 of this year in 2020, delayed maintenance had dropped down to 17% of vehicles on the road. When we hit Q2 of 2020, it drives up to 20%. So we've got a 2.5% increase, which, we put a piece out on our website. If you ever wanted to go out and look at it, it's pretty in depth about delayed maintenance. That's around 8.5 to 9 million vehicles that are out there that have said the increase, by the way, of around 8 or 9 million vehicles that have delayed maintenance. Well, as you know, we started doing a weekly tracking study where we're asking literally the exact same question about delayed maintenance, but we're doing it weekly. What happened in that July into August timeframe is that 20% number shot up over 30%. It just rose dramatically up into the point where you get to August 10th. Literally August 10th. It hits a peak and then it started dropping back down. And so that's good news, right? Because that means people are coming into the market. They're not delaying the repairs. People have been driving more, as we've been seeing, right? So all these things kind of go hand in hand. What does the future have to hold? I don't know, but we're hoping that it continually declines to get back down to its normalized, 18-ish%. When it fluctuates, Carm, it fluctuates from 18 to 18.3 to 7. You know what I mean? These aren't massive. There's a constant, if you will. But this time, it's skyrocketed. In the months that we would expect it to skyrocket, it's skyrocketed.
For all the right reasons, tight with money, you're at home, vehicle miles driven, everything is down, and it's almost like the vehicle was put in a very low priority of where money was going to be spent. I mean, no doubt, I think we all looked at it like that.
Right. Yeah, and when you think about what it is that they're delaying, because they tell us, we ask them, what did you not do? What do you have to do? Tell me if you're surprised. Oil, tires, battery, brakes, scheduled maintenance, right? Those are like the top. It's what you would expect, and they're not driving, so therefore all of these things, they may need a tire, but why? What's the point, right? What's the point in changing my tires if I'm driving, 20 miles a week?
Brett, any comment on what Bill's saying?
Well, I mean, the numbers, I love numbers. They speak volumes. I love the fact that you're gathering this data. But you're right, the numbers speak volumes. But it needs to be a persistent progression all the time with our advisors, is they've got to be in education mode. And I explain this to my guys all the time. You can't just sit there and say, hey, your car needs spark plug, blah, 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 blah. People don't care. It's like the book I read years ago by Simon Sinek. We're really good at business owners as telling people what we do and how we do it. Oh, that makes us feel good as technicians and advisors. And, the bottom line is the customer, that's their secondary concern. They want to know, why am I spending my money? Why am I investing my money to do this type of stuff? So, I mean, it's wonderful to have. I love stats. I'm a stat guy. I'm right with you, Bill. But if our team is not putting this rubber to the road on a daily basis, it will fall flat on its face. And I can't emphasize that anymore. All the big trainers out there, the guys you bring on, will say this till they're blue in the face. If our front counter is not educating, it doesn't matter what our techs do, what the estimators do, doesn't matter at all. If we're not doing that, we'll lose.
Well, you're perfectly placed in this panel, Brett. Bill loves numbers. He gives them to you. You look at them and you love them too, but you do something with them. Frankly, that's got to be the message that we dig into today, is what do we do with the numbers in the face of the consumer?
When we started doing this weekly vehicle maintenance monitor, because that's where this data comes from. Every single week we go out and we ask a series of questions, and these questions revolve around some pretty important topics. We started to be weekly because even though we have quarterly tracking studies, our customers were, things were changing so dramatically week over week over week that we wanted to put something together that was more directive and more quick, if you will, as things change. That study, by the way, talks about what people are having done to their vehicle, what they're delaying, and then we get into attitudinal statements, right? Like this. And one of the things we wanted to ask was, how pervasive are people really looking at reviews for vehicle repair shops, right? And does it really matter? And, this is one of those things where I personally thought that it would be pretty static over time. And there's two things, in my opinion, that are happening here with this slide, one of which you can't see that we have data on, which is, number one, people are actually looking at reviews. What we can't say is whether or not prior to the pandemic, if they were looking at reviews. I'm guessing that they were, but we're measuring it now. And what you notice over the course of the last 7 or 8 weeks is that it's kind of jumped up to the point where it started at 20. If you think about July, people weren't driving nearly as much, but all of a sudden we start doing this little recovery. Vehicles are being driven more, and all of a sudden you get to 7 weeks out from July. You're in mid-August, and you're almost at 50%. Of people saying, I am it's either extremely likely or likely that I would research a review on a vehicle repair shop if that's where I was taking my vehicle to have it repaired. I think the other half of that story, it isn't just that they're looking at vehicle repair shops for reviews. The other piece of information that's not on here is that they're scared. And so one of the things that's not on here is how likely would it be? How fearful are they of actually contracting or being exposed to COVID at a repair shop? That's the other question that we ask. And it's not low. I think if I remember correctly, it's in the 30 to 40% range. So if we ask ourselves, why are they doing research? Odds are there's probably I would surmise that there's probably a good correlation between the fear factor that they want these touchless experiences and what do they have to offer, right? That to me is what this slide really portends and talks to.
The right lower quadrant talks about touchless customer experience.
And so we only started 4 weeks ago, but that week 7 number where it hit almost 50% on doing reviews. Well, guess what? It's almost the same number for, extremely likely or likely choosing a shop based on touchless customer experience. They seem to ride together in terms of their trend.
Brett, let me ask you a question about this exact thing. Are you sensing the customer's reaction that because you have that touchless experience, they're very comfortable with you, or they've come in to your shop as a new customer because they're not getting it somewhere else?
I mean, here in the Midwest, we're in a smaller town. We're not experiencing that like some folks do out west in big towns or anything of that nature. We handle 8,000 to 9,000 customers a year. And I've had, in the last 5 months, I've had 2 people walk in the door and kind of like, oh, you guys don't wear masks all day long? And I'm like, well, I've done the data research too, and I get it. We're cleaning all day long, which is what we were doing before the pandemic anyways. And I mean, I'm a freak. I wash my hands a dozen times a day. I'm just that way. We're in an industry where we're touching a lot of things. So we're not seeing that in the Midwest. A lot of guys are seeing it in big towns. I'm not saying we're right. I'm not saying we're wrong. I'm just telling you the facts and the feelings behind what people are doing. And
so Brett, the research would actually bear that out. So if we looked at this, and we do look at it regionally, these numbers look different Northeast and West Coast, right? They're driving what these numbers are up. If you look at Midwest and Southeast, they're typically a little lower in terms of expectations, to your point, right? For the reasons I think that you're saying. And that's part of the reason we look at it regionally, is because states are opening up at different paces.
Hey, Carm here, and coming up, Bill Thompson shows what % of consumers are willing to take a future appointment for their next service repair. Hey, today's pandemic is causing so much stress and uncertainty for everyone right now, especially shop owners. Now, how do I make sure that my staff and my customers stay protected while still moving cars through the bays? Contactless service is our new normal, and having a shop management system that not only supports this, but actually helps your business thrive through it all is key. Shopware's digital workflow with remote pay will provide that solution for you. Amy Matnett from Auto Craftsman recently commented on social media, and I quote, "I can't even express how grateful I am that I jumped on board with Shopware on January 1st. Would have never guessed that I would be the only one writing service at my shop, as I haven't worked in the shop for the last 15 years. But she goes on and says, I'm running my shop nonstop every day with Shopware to help me not only get the job done easier and faster, but am totally wowing my customers." End quote. Hey, if you want to wow your customers too, request a demo at getshopware.com. Hey, Carm here. Are your competitors ranking higher than you in search? Is your marketing company using plain vanilla recycled content? And does your marketing look like every other shop's and you're not even sure it's working? Powerful, effective marketing is not cookie cutter. It should showcase all of the things that are unique about your business. Don't you think you deserve better results? It's time to make a change. Our good friends at Shop Marketing Pros are past shop owners and industry veterans. They get it. Their process is pretty simple. Listen, create, and do. They spend time getting to know you and create a unique marketing message and then do the heavy lifting for you so you can do what you do best. Run a shop and fix cars. Do yourself a favor. Give your shop the top-notch marketing it deserves. Schedule a call today on the web at shopmarketingpros.com. That's shopmarketingpros.com. Don't wait. Do it now. Yeah, all of Bill's data has the geographic, where the data is coming from, what areas of the world, both not only geographic, but I think urban, suburban, and rural, right?
Yes, that's correct.
If we put up everything that Bill could bring and show us today, we would be here till dinner time taking a look at all this stuff. So I so appreciate, Bill, you bringing on what you have for us today to really make it a lively discussion. What about this one? Accept an appointment in the future. Wait a minute. I mean, that's what we're here to talk about. And Brett, I'd love to know, are you offering financing to your customers as an option to get stuff done?
Yeah, we've considered it, but I know this sounds like I'm really picky and uppity, but our customer base is not the demographic that requires financing. I know friends of mine that are in areas that are different than ours that they do it. So I'm not opposed to it, but we have a request maybe twice a year for it.
Well, you're not the candidate for this question, but I know there's so many guys, ladies, shop owners out there. It's a very big part of their arsenal. And to see this information, Bill, proving, and here's what I find out. They've got financing, but they're not using it as often. And the consumer is saying, yeah, it may make me help with a decision.
In time, for this particular year, what we're going through, what'll be interesting just to see how that changes with consumer confidence, right? I always mentally go back to how confident are consumers in terms of, how they're feeling about the economy or how they, or job, whether they have a job and those kinds of things. To Brett's point, his customer may not be that customer, but there are certainly other places that have a more profound effect on, whether it's employment or not. It'll be interesting to see how this changes over time. I had no idea what to expect. I didn't know if this would be 15%, because you always think somebody's going to want it. But to see it at a third to 40% or so of the folks saying, yeah, I would actually take advantage of it if I had a really costly repair, I think is a fascinating thing.
As I was thinking about today's episode, guys, I wrote these random thoughts, and I'm not sure that we're going to cover them all. I think it's good to toss these thoughts out so that people can see the potential value of this episode, and if we do or we don't cover them. But I wrote down miles driven. We talked about that. I wrote down COVID. We talked about that in the telecommute. Talked about road trips and how some people a few months back says, summertime, we at least got to get out and do something. So road trips, I think, helped many of the independents do well. Another really crazy thought today that I had was there was an economic crash in, I think, the late 80s. And if you were a financial person, either you became the best at what you were doing and you toughed it out, or you closed. And I look at what COVID has possibly done to some people in our industry that weren't 100% prepared with the right software. DVI hadn't kept up. I think we're going to maybe ultimately see that our industry reel from that. I wrote down DVI. I wrote down critical scheduling. I wrote down loaners. And when I think of finance as an option, I think loaners is also another option. Brett, do you use loaners?
We have them, but we're actually minimizing the loaner fleet. I think loaners are an absolute, but you have to be in it in the big game. You got to have a fleet of them or not be in them at all. Utilize Uber every day, and it's super efficient. We're located centrally in town, and I usually have an Uber here within 3 to 7 minutes, and it effectively gets our customers where they need to go. I love it. I got the idea from our elite group. We had a couple guys that did it, and I'm like, let's give this a try in our small town of Peoria, which is 110,000 people. Absolute effective. We're kind of going away from the loaner fleet, and just whatever it takes, we just give people rides, and we don't. I shouldn't say we don't care what it costs, but we also are cognitive of that. But at the same time, most of the time in our town, it's $6 to $15 to get somebody somewhere, and monthly budget's about $650 a month on Uber. So take that versus having
maintaining all those vehicles.
Fleet cars around. It's a big savings.
I had a chance to talk to some shop owners yesterday at one of our first face-to-faces in Buffalo, and the whole topic was about loaner cars. So interesting. Thanks, guys. Bill, let me throw up that slide here.
Appointment in the future. Yeah. You and I, Carm, had this conversation about, where do consumers sit on this? Your comments before were really interesting because, we don't sometimes think about the things that, Brett might think about or you might think about in the context of the industry. We actually need the feedback. So this was a very prescient question, which was, will a consumer accept an appointment for a future visit? Kind of like a dentist appointment, right? Or a haircut or something along that line, which is how you'd put it before. No expectations on my part, but 60% of the people actually are either extremely likely or likely to take advantage of that appointment, which is, to me, is even as a consumer myself of a vehicle, I would never have even thought of doing it. Right. It just would have never crossed my mind. I just think it's a really interesting number. I'm kind of curious on your thoughts and Brett's thought on this, because I don't have any context other than to say a fair amount of people said, yeah, absolutely. It would be something that I would take advantage of.
To me, that's encouraging. To explain our system, and Carm knows this, we've been doing what we call future follow-up calls for about 7 years. I partner with a gentleman out of Phoenix, Arizona. And so every Tuesday, my advisors have what we call in the industry, I used to work in the corporate world, it's called a pre-qualified list of customers that you ask permission to call. And I'll back up to that point. You ask permission to call in the future to go, hey, can I schedule you in? We've been doing that for about 7 years. Our customers are groomed for that. But the key is it goes back to that final close sale. I view this final close sale as one of the most important points of our customer touch point system. Okay, so we have 8 different points that we touch our customers. And if that advisor, and I go back to my original statement, if that advisor is not educating and explaining why we're doing things, knowing that we want to get 250,000 miles out of cars. I love pithy questions that come out to customers. One of our favorite lines is, what's your long game of your car? What do you want to do with this? So you start extracting information from people, get them conversational about the car, and stretching their mind. I think that's a huge thing in our industry, is we forget in the service industry that you and I can get our cars to 250,000 miles. The average consumer doesn't think that way. And so I've done the model. Carmen and I did a whole show on a spreadsheet that I did. I've shared it around the country. I can't tell you how many times, where I explain to people, this is what happens when you buy a new car versus buying a used car, keeping it 250,000 miles for its life. So if your advisors are not educating that almost on a daily basis with every customer, they're going to lose. They're going to lose those sales. Our next step is to be able to do what you're saying, Bill, and that's to schedule the appointment in. Rather than asking permission, and saying, hey, do you mind if I call you the week of December 13th and we'll talk about scheduling this in. Our next step is to go, hey, I'm going to book you in. What's your favorite day of the week to bring the car in? I'm going to book you in on Thursday, whatever Thursday is in December. I'll give you a text before we do it and start that ball rolling, because it's like a big ball. You got to get over the top of a mountain with these people, this factory maintenance, and reducing the cost per mile. You got to think of statements like that. Hey, I'm going to reduce your cost per mile. You got to have those emotional, like, hey, I want my customers to be thinkers. I don't want to just sell ice to an Eskimo. I want them to understand what game they're getting into. And if I can have somebody do maintenance on a car on 10 cents on the dollar versus going out and sign up for a $486 car payment all day long, I'm going to be their friend. I'm going to be their advocate. I'm going to be their partner. And that's what I think we have to convince our advisors to do on a daily basis, is become educators and not think of themselves as salesmen.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating comment too, because I really like the every consumer has a story about their car. Because as soon as you said it, I thought about the car I drive. I'm like, yeah, it's paid off and I'm driving it into the ground. That's what I want to get out of that
Absolutely.
car. Well, somebody else may have a different story around it, which I think is really fascinating from a sales perspective, if you will, to get them talking. But the other thing that you said that I don't know that I even looked at this number was it from a sales perspective. You know, it's not a cold lead, it's a warm lead. And not only is it a warm lead, it's 50% of the people might actually you might win 50% of the time is what that number means, which is fascinating.
You know, Carmen and I've talked about this before, but I like to take of the knee-jerk statement that people make and they go, I'm just going to go out and trade my car in. And I don't think we realize how much energy that one statement takes. So I'm going to go out and trade my car in. Let's analyze that. So they're going to go spend hours and hours on the computer researching a car, going to the used car facility, kicking the tires, the whole ball of wax. And then they're going to come back to my business and go, hey, Brett, I'm going to spend $100 with you to do a pre-purchase inspection on that car. Cool. They're going to deliver the car, whatever the case may be. So then you go through 3 or 4 cars that they're doing pre-purchase inspection on, and then they go out and they sign up for tax, title, and license fees. So I tell customers, I'm like, hey, how much energy and time and money does that take for you to go out and say, I'm just going to go out and trade the car in? And they 9 times out of 10, they're usually going, gosh, I never thought about that stuff. And that's our job, is to help people think about stuff they don't think of, right? It's the same thing when we go buy a house. I don't want to go out and buy a house every 5 years. I think it's enormously expensive to do that. But if I were to go out and buy a house, I want that person to lead me and guide me through that process. And that's what our advisors are. They're leading people through that process of turning over all the rocks to go, what do I want to do? I want to go trade my car in. Well, do you know you lose $1,500 on a trade? And everybody I talk to goes, I didn't know that. And I go, well, if you got a car that's worth $5,000 to Carm, if I sell it to Carm straight on, you go to the dealership and they're going to give you $3,500. That's the average loss. And they're like, are you serious? I'm like, well, they're taking the whole sales process off your hands. They should be able to, deduct that amount of money, but just know that going into it, you're going to lose $1,500 value on that car right off the top of the bat. So I just think people need to embrace this type of information, and your advisors are going to be much more effective at what they do every day.
Brett, are people embracing the math when you help them with it?
Oh my goodness. Absolutely. I love it too. Because I'm a numbers guy and I'm like, hey, just look at the math. Look at the math. And my formula is when I buy a car, I buy it 4 years old and I keep it 12.5 years, whatever, give or take. I'm being really anal about that. And I keep it to 250,000 miles and I get rid of it and make somebody a good car for 30, 40, 50,000 miles. And I go back to the formula. The average new car loses 30% of its value in the first year. The average new car loses 60% of its value in 4 years. I want somebody else to take that hit. And generally speaking, our customer base is the type of customer base that I want them to understand. Let somebody else take the 60% depreciation hit. As Dave Ramsey says, the only people who should be buying new cars are people with $1 million net worth or more who can absorb that type of loss on a car. Now, whether or not people on this podcast go out and buy new cars every 4 years, it's none of my business, but it's my job to educate you to go, hey, do you know what kind of depreciation you're bleeding every year on that car you go out and buy? It's a piece of equipment that gets us from point A to point B. Yes, we want it safe. Yes, we want it reliable, but also at the same time, you got to play the long game in these cars.
I'm sold. I mean, just sign me up. I want an appointment every 6 months, positively every Tuesday afternoon, every 6 months. if we do it with the doctors and we set our appointments for our yearly physical, and anything else is, of course, the doctor's the expert, like the consultant, the service advisor, asking us those right kind of questions. Why not, when you get your hair cut, because I got back to cutting hair. I don't know if you did yet, Bill or Brett, but when I got back to cutting hair, she says, so how long you going, Carm? 3 weeks or 4 weeks? What mood are you in? You know, your hair grows longer in the summer, and it's this sale process. You can't get out of the hair salon unless you book an appointment. I do want to talk about that, but you know how much I love the Breaks for Breasts program? Annie and I had a personal experience last year. Let me get this right. I just wanted to share with everybody, my great friends, Leanne and Laura, sent me my own shirt, my own cup koozie. Isn't that cool? And of course, some of the great companies that are supporting Breaks for Breasts. And check this out. Check this hat out. Breaks for Breasts logo from CarQuest and TechNet. So I got some of my own Breaks for Breasts swag in the mail yesterday, and I was so happy to get it because, we've done podcasts and Carmcasts and webathons and for this great program, breaksforbreasts.com. It happens all the month of October. And thank you to Leanne and Laura Frank for that. Is anything that Brett said, Bill, surprise you? And I know you talk to, service professionals all over the country. Was any of his passion, did it light a fire under you? And, you may say, hey, let's add a different question to our surveys.
Yes. I will say what it does get me thinking about is because, right, Brett, you're a numbers guy, and so am I. So when you say that, we go out and we talk to 500 shops every month. Part of me wonders if we should measure their capability or willingness or any attitudinal statements from other shops around the U.S. to see whether or not that's something people are doing or they would consider or how they would tackle it. It is a very interesting question. On the consumer side, there's always a difference between what somebody says they're going to do versus what they actually do, right? So even though it's a 50% number, sometimes that doesn't equate to actual action, but it sure is telling that it can.
You know what I find interesting? When you go back to this particular survey that we had about accepting an appointment in the future, Bill, it would be so interesting to find out, guys like Brett, are they actually offering it? There's the gap. The consumers are saying, I'd love to have that. And how many shops are, Brett would obviously be a person that says, yes, we offer it. And that would be an interesting stat to see what that gap is. But Brett, when you offer this to your customers, how often do they accept the future appointment?
This survey helps me get tipped over the edge to start doing this. Right now, our process is we ask permission to call that week. If anything, Bill, thank you. This inspires me to go to the next level and say, look, how about we schedule you in that week? Because what happens is if my guys at the final close sale, and they're not perfect, they drop the ball. If my guys just say, hey, thanks, have a great day. And then 5 months later, they call that customer up and said, hey, I committed to call you this week. And they're like, no, you didn't. I don't know what you're talking about. You never asked permission. They don't say that. But the whole atmosphere of the call is like a little bit reserved on the customer's end. But if you're explicit with that customer and either A, ask permission, or B, say, hey, I'm going to schedule you in for, February 19th, 2021. Is that okay? And to me, I look at this stuff, it's like when we get into cold water, right? This is what people do with our businesses too. When I get into cold water, I don't jump in. I don't have a lot of excess stuff on my body. So it shocks the heck out of me. So when I get into cold water, I go one toe at a time, and then I get my foot in, and then I start sliding in. And I really believe from the psychology of how customers work, that's how they come into our businesses, because they're coming alongside us, and then they eke a little bit more toward us, and then they eke a little bit more toward us, and I'm getting the trust. And then finally, when I ask a customer at the final close, say, hey, do you mind if I call you? If I've got that trust with that customer, I can say, hey, can I schedule you in February 19th, 2021 for this? Absolutely. I think Bill's right on with these numbers. I think we're going to get a majority of yeses. And it's not going to be that way every time. But if the education doesn't precede that, you're going to have a really hard time tipping people over the edge. You got to know your numbers when it comes to these cars and how much they cost to operate. The government reimbursement right now, what is it, 56.5 cents, whatever it is per mile, they'll reimburse you for going out. Has anybody ever looked at those numbers and what adds into those numbers? They are almost spot on. I've done the research, depreciation, licenses, registration, tires, maintenance, repairs, everything. That adds up to about 50 plus cents per mile to operate a car. It's not a small man's game. You got to be, if you're going to buy a car, you're going to be paying money every single time you jump in that car. I always said, I did a presentation to young kids one time. We were getting ready to drive, and I said, here's what I think cars should have, like taxi cabs. I think you should have a quarter meter inside the car. Every time you go drive that car, you take a roll of quarters with you and you start flipping quarters in there. You drive 10 miles, I want $5 worth of quarters in that change machine, because that's how much it's going to cost you to operate that car. And they're like, no. And I'm like, do the math. Let me show you the numbers. I'll show you the numbers in a split second. So
I have this unbelievable dentist who not only doesn't let me leave without a cleaning appointment twice a year, but the way they communicate with me is off the charts. If it's not email, it's texting. Of course, I select the approval thing. And, I say, it's in my calendar. I get that. But you know what I need? I need the kick in the butt with the text to help remind me. What part of our industry don't we get that part? So, Brett, if you say I'll call you the week of December, whatever. Listen, what's the best day of the week? Let's at least do that critical maintenance that we need to do based on the miles you're driving in your vehicle. And let's talk about that loose front end that you have. It's going to be more critical than ever. Love to book an hour and a half and get this stuff done. Here's the date. And then your software somehow just takes over and almost assures that 90% of the people show up.
You know how when you go to meetings and you get all jacked up and get new ideas? This isn't a new idea, of course. But my guys are going to say, oh, man, he just got off that podcast and now he wants to schedule future appointments at the closed sale. Bill, I'm so glad you have the numbers. I'm going to play this to these guys and say, hey, here are the numbers. 60% of people want it.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, Brett. What's interesting is Carm, you mentioned your dentist, right? As consumers, we just had this conversation with a customer, and I've been having this conversation internally for a little while in thinking about the consumer packaged good industry, for example, versus the automotive industry, and how are these things different? And probably more importantly, why? Why are they different? People are conditioned to set an appointment like a dentist or a haircut. What's so different about the auto industry other than it's reactive? My car has to break or something's got to be wrong for me to take it in, right? I mean, why is this the case? Why is this something that the industry isn't getting ahead of, or at least trying to take advantage of a consumer process that's already ingrained into people that they do for all sorts of other things, right? And hence 50% of the people saying, yeah, I'd accept a future appointment. They're already doing it at other places.
There's the next big question then, Bill, for us. If you wouldn't schedule an appointment in the future, why? And let's find out if it's, I'm not sure I'll have the money. I'm not, again, the excuse is I'm not keeping the car. And if we can find out what the consumer says about why appointments aren't right, we could change the entire industry. Flip it upside down in the next year with this.
I don't even think you need to know it. 25%'s a win. You know what I mean? Like 30, it's not even like it has to be 50%. Anything better than not asking at all is a win. Obviously, unless of course it's extraordinarily time consuming and costly for the shops. But this is, to me, is a practice that I've never gotten asked ever.
Every time I would ever go to a conference and I'd come back, they'd go out and say, oh, no, Carm went to a conference. We're going to have to change something, and we're going to have meetings about what he learned and why he wants to do this and why he wants to do that. And so can you imagine all the meetings that the industry's been having? We've been Zoomed, unbelievably. I didn't do this because of Zoom. I've been doing this for 189 weeks. We've been just steady, going hot each and every week in all the podcasts, trying to teach and help elevate the industry. And this is just another wonderful, wonderful example. But, you're probably going to leave right now. You're an hour behind me, and you're probably just going to sit down with the troops and say, guys, by the end of the day, I want 3 scheduled.
It's improvement, not change, Carm. We don't say that. Change.
Exactly. It's improvement.
Listen, I had a blast, guys. I really did. Thank you both so much for being here. Bill Thompson, CEO, IMR Inc., automotiveresearch.com. You'll continue to see a whole bunch of surveys on my weekly aftermarketweekly.com show. As long as Bill keeps sending them to me, I'll be showing them. And Brent Beachler from Beachlers Vehicle Care and Repair, Peoria, Illinois, and a great contributor to the podcast. Guys, have a wonderful weekend as we wind down summer here in the U.S.
Thanks for being on board to listen and learn from the premier automotive aftermarket podcast. Until next time,